domestic so we are wearing the color purple, and this is because October is Domestic Awareness Month, and is the color to represent that. You will also find a link to today's event program in the chat section. In there, you'll find a schedule and the speaker's biography, so you can follow along. We've also allocated 25 minutes at the end for a Q&A. We encourage you to participate, ask questions. The purpose of this space is for all of us to learn from one another and disseminate that what's being told to us. So don't be afraid to ask questions. You can put them in the chat section and somebody will read them during our Q&A. And at the end, there'll be an exam, so you better pay attention. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. There's going to be a short survey. So it will once you close Zoom and end for the day, it's going to open up. It's going to pop up into a window, and there's going to be a survey. So we encourage you to just fill it out because it does help us inform next topics and any other material that can be of benefit to the community. And don't forget to check our website at thisletter.com. We love to hear from you. So write us your stories and any ideas. You can get in touch with us at info@thisletter.com. And yeah, so I'll give a background on thisletter.com, and then I'll introduce our speakers. So I will. I'm sure you want to go to thisletter.com. So thisletter.com was inspired by a thought. Every woman is a daughter. From that thought emerged the website, a platform where women of all ages from around the world come together to share their stories of accomplishment and strength, struggle and failure, of new thoughts. This is a platform where women talk about the ordinary and the extraordinary, where just being an individual is celebrated, a platform where men who are making a difference in the lives of women lend their voice. And that's basically the idea of behind thisletter.com. So if you give me a second, I'm going to introduce our first speaker.
Liz, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but can we just have everybody turn off their speakers except for the person who is speaking, because we're picking up echoes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about interrupting.
No, thank you. Yes, thank you. So I'll introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Vishnupriya Saxena. Vishnupriya is a seasoned professional with over 22 years of experience in the field of corporate social responsibility, diversity and inclusion, employee experience, corporate communications, and branding. She's worked with Wells Fargo, EGS as vice president in her last corporate assignment. Her expertise lies in initiating, designing, and managing strategic programs with a focus on culture building. She is passionate about women's inclusion in society and industry alike. She's been an active corporate citizen, having been part of various industry forums where she's led a few committees. She was part of NASSCOM's Diversity and Inclusion Council, Hyderabad chapter. She led the CSR committee at Hyderabad Software Export Association. She led the Women's Forum of Society for Cyberbot Security Council, and industry and police nonprofit body. She continues to work with the local police department of Cyberbad and Brakashanda, designing outreach programs such as Margadarshak and Sangamitra, and with a focus on helping and supporting women in distress. Yeah, so I'm so sorry for me not being able to pronounce some of those names and initiatives. But Vishnupriya, can you please talk more about Marga Dashak and Sangamitra's initiatives? How did they come about? What problems are they solving? What's their objective, and how were you involved with them?
Thank you so much, Liz. And sorry for giving you such tongue twister words. I must work on my profile so it becomes a little simpler to speak through. But thank you so much. And let me first start by thanking first Vanita for bringing me on this platform. And I learned about the great work all of you are trying to do. And, you know, in general, we end up saying guys all the time. I was going to say all of you guys doing, no, but all of us are doing together. And really happy to be here. And I'm hoping what I share right now, I believe whatever we are trying to do, and very quickly, I'm based in Hyderabad, which is a city in the southern part of the country, India. And Hyderabad is very, I think most of you would have heard of the name of the city. It is on the world map for IT, ITES kind of work that happens here. And offshoring, outsourcing, it's pretty much the hub after Bangalore. So that's really what the city is up to. And IT industry is really the large part of the city's economy, the state's economy in that senses. So just wanted to call that out. And whatever work I have done, I've done it in the city, and whatever initiatives I talk about, and I'm hoping that some of it probably would be helpful in your cities, and it's pretty replicable, I believe. And it's worked very well. So what I've done is I've put up a PPT. So whatever I'm saying, there's a reference point for you. I may not be exactly following the slide order, but I just wanted to have something out there so you can refer to it. So I'll just put it up. Give me a second. I hope my screen can be seen. Okay, I see a nod, so I'm good with that. All right. So we are talking about domestic violence, unfortunately, a topic, an agenda, but it's prevalent, it's there, it's out there. It's important that we discuss so that we are able to first put that topic on the table so we can find solutions for people who are suffering through that. Very quickly, while Liz did reference some of these terms, I'm going to talk about just the part I have been playing with SCSC and the various initiatives that we have had through that. Now, SCSC, like Liz said, is an industry and police body. It's a local body within Hyderabad. Its span of influence is really the region that we operate in. The region that we are operating in is called Cyberabad. It comes from the term cyberspace or cyber, because their IT industry is the predominant industry in this space, and which is why the region is called Cyberabad. So just for your reference, and otherwise these words sound all over the place. So this was an effort started about 15 years ago, is when the IT industry was taking shape in the city, so as to make the city conducive, so as to make the city available to the industry and obviously attractive, and you know, collaboratively we can arrive at ways in which the industry can thrive in this city. So that's how this body came about. Like I said, it's a 15-year-old body, and the whole purpose, it's a non-profit body. It's a collaborative effort with the police department and the industry. So pretty much everything that's done here, there's an equal participation of the industry and the police department. So it's and I think it's one of its kind in the entire country. I have not heard of a similar initiative, which is a public-private partnership in this manner, in any other country so far, unless any of you are aware of that. So in that sense, it's really unique, and a couple of other cities within the country are looking to replicate that. Please feel free to ask me questions, because there's a lot of information I'm sharing and would be happy to clarify. Within that, so within the within this body, there are a couple of focus areas. Obviously, it's about safety and security because it's with the police. So general safety and security is one focus area. Cyber safety and security is getting a lot of attention. Women's safety security is one of the primary agendas, not only of this body, but of the state. So India is divided into different states. It's a federated model. I'm sure you're familiar. And this state is called Telangana. It's a newly formed state. It's one of the newest states in the country. And it is doing a lot of good work for women, especially women's safety and security. And traffic safety and security is the other part. So in this manner, there are a couple of these focus areas that we have. And the women's safety security is basically run by a forum. It's called the Women's Forum, again, participated in by women from the industry and women from the police department, men from the police department, both. I led this forum. So I've been associated with this body for about 5 to 6 years now. And I led this forum for about 2 years and have been associated otherwise as a volunteer. Again, the whole objective of the forum is to ensure that the city, the area, the region that we're talking about is the safest, securest for women. In India, safety is still not as prevalent as far as women are concerned. We are getting there. It's getting better and better. Yet there are interventions required for us to ensure that the roads, the external environment is safe for women. So that's really where this came about from. And the primary motto that the forum has, a primary work that we do is in the space of educating, empowering and enabling women. And I was the Women's Forum leader while I was with Wells Fargo. So it's industry leaders who take up the leadership of these forums, and they determine what is the kind of work that will go on here. So a little bit of a background before I kind of get into the programs that I'm talking about. So very quickly, and again, the programs are it started with awareness as the focus. And one of the big objectives that we had was also to bridge the gap between citizens and the police department. So in general, at least in India, police does not have a very good image. So the perception that people have of the police department, which is primarily portrayed by the movies, is not great. So people are very apprehensive of going to the police, directly approaching them. There's a lot of social stigma attached to it, etc., etc. But there's so much that the police can actually do and help people, and which is where the bridging was one of the primary reasons why we got into or got started with some of this work that we are doing. I've put a little bit of statistics here just to give us a perspective of, in India, in Indian context, what does domestic violence look like, what kind of statistics there are. And I'm sure some of it is absolutely universal, but India as a country has not been the most equal as far as gender is concerned. And again, I'm sure you folks are familiar with that. So some stats here for you to understand the complexity and the largeness of the problem of domestic violence that we are talking about, and violence against women in general as well. So just a quick overview to that. So every third woman within the age group of 15 to 49 has faced violence of some form or the other in the country. And then a couple of other statistics that are there. One of you did touch upon the fact that men also end up suffering, but the statistics about women kind of makes us look up and take notice of this. And this requires a institutional intervention at various levels, and which is why we're all here and talking about it. I'll move on. And please, again, like I said, please stop me wherever I am. So just to give you a little bit of context now, from here and taking that into account, and especially last year, we did see a lot of spike in domestic violence issues and cases, especially during the lockdown period, since all the action shifted at home. And there were, the police department was receiving cases left, right, and center of domestic violence, and which is where we again got together to see and say, what kind of an intervention can we make to help the situation that is there? So, and I'll step back and first take you through the Margadarshak program. So when you look at the like I said, this is a police and industry body. So our sphere of influence is also the industry, primarily the industry. Again, it's an organized way for us to reach out to people and help people out who are in distress. So there is a substantial percentage of women who work in the IT industry. But over a period of time, we learned through our interactions with women within our offices, our workplaces, and the police learned. And from there, we came to the conclusion that while at the workplace, women have access to redressal mechanisms for specifically workplace related issues. But there are also issues that women face, especially given the gender stereotyping within the country, the societal structures, etc., which are beyond the employer's purview. And there is no structured way in which they can be helped for that. And with that as the ask, as the requirement, we came up with the Margadarshak program. This program is for the corporate part of the society, so to say. And this is again, Margadarshak is made up of two words. Marg in Hindi means path, and Darshak in Hindi means the shower of a path. So Margadarshak is really a bridge between the police and citizens or people within the industry, and specifically for situations which are beyond the employer's purview. So typically domestic violence situations is what comes to our attention here. Now, our whole idea was to bring in people who are within your office setups, who's your friend, who's your neighbor, who's your work colleague. If they are equipped with information to help you, your journey to get help becomes that much simpler. And a big thing that we realized was lack of awareness. So while people know there's a police department, I have been saying that over and over again, folks don't want to reach out. Even educated people who are working, who are financially independent, they do not want to reach out to the police. So this was a program that we started out where we had people from within the corporate nominated by the companies, and they went through a training program where our primary objective was to start with kind of inquiry and awareness building, then equip them with information, with resources, enable them to be able to deal with situations like these, and then with them, through them, empower others also. So that's really been the reason and objective. So we started this program, Margadarshak, in 2016. Again, like we are saying, they are really the bridge only. They're not problem solvers themselves. They're people like you and me who have their day jobs, but they're a little more aware. And they're probably people who are accessible, who are seen as accessible to people. And if they're there within the company available, an individual can probably feel a little more comfortable to walk up to them and share what's happening with them, and then probably help can be reached. Now, we started this program in 2016, so it's been almost 5 years that we have been running, and we have about 800 plus Margadarshaks out there in the industry. Now, with the success of this and taking what COVID threw in front of us last year, we came up with the Sanghamitra program. Again, it's very similar to the Margadarshak program, but the Sanghamitra program opens up the participation to communities and residential communities. So basically, we have these organized residential setups. And like I was saying, we realized that there has been a substantial rise in domestic violence situations. And we needed to have a friend available within the community who can help you. And Margadarshak was still limited to companies. Everyone was working from home. So pretty much every kind of action moved home. And which is when we came up with the program Sanghamitra. Here, people from within residential communities can nominate themselves, go through the training, and then be available for people within their residential communities to offer help for those who are in distress. Sanghamitra, again, as the name suggests, is made up of two words. Sangha means community, Mitra means friend. And that's really what we are trying to do, is a friend who will help you when you are in distress, and he or she is available for you within the community. The Margadarshak program had more women participation. Now, increasingly, we are getting more men as well. Whereas Sanghamitra from batch 1 had almost 20-25% of the participation or people who want to be a Sangamitra are men too. So that's a good sign for us. I've just put a cycle of really what happens and why people don't come forward. So there are gender stereotypes we are dealing with, the societal structures we are dealing with, there's social stigma on bringing up an issue which is supposed to be a family matter when you think about domestic violence. Lack of awareness of people on the various redressal ways that are available to them. And there is a bit of a lack in the system itself, a lack of faith in the system. So when there's a person like me or person like you who is a friend whom I know, who I meet, say in the corridor or meet when I take my kids to the park, I have a little bit more faith on that individual. And if they tell me that, you know, come with me, I will take you and we will get some help for you. My propensity to trust that person is higher than the trust in the system. So that's really what we are trying to build, is to build this group of trusted individuals who can then help these individuals who are in distress and who needs to be helped. I'll pause there and see if there are any questions, thoughts. And I have a couple of maybe more slides and then I'll be done. But if there's anything that I can help with questions. Okay, I'll move on. Very quickly, I'll give you a bit of a context from a Sangamitra perspective. So the primary thing, like I said, there was a spike that we saw. Both the programs are very similar in nature. Their objective is very similar. One of the things that we saw from survivors' perspective, based on our own experience, so there are a couple of NGOs that we work with who are working on the ground with people across classes, levels, socioeconomic backgrounds, and their perspectives was very helpful because they're out there on the ground in the field helping women who have suffered domestic violence. One of the biggest things that they feel is, who do I reach out for help? I think the first step there is also, it takes a while for them to understand that this is something that's happening to me and it can be complained about or it can be brought up. It's an issue that I need to bring up. I think it takes a while for them to even understand that and comprehend that and articulate that. So they're very confused on who do I reach out for help. They believe it's their family matter and it's a thing that happens with women, and who can really help me for that. They also think, what can police do? It will just make it a, I'll make a big deal out of probably a family matter, and it should be resolved within the family. And a lot of women go through this kind of abuse just thinking this. And they're also very concerned about their family members going to jail and their life being impacted. So they're very family dignity and all of that kind of comes into play. And people around them who are neighbors or who are colleagues who see this happening to them, they also don't know how to help. So it is their family matter. We should not interfere. What can we do anyway? Complaining may spoil the reputation of the society community. Again, it's a private matter. How can I step over that line of personal and private, and how do I go about it? So these programs help these individuals to, one, understand what is happening. Second, it equips them to, how can they approach? They're equipped with a little bit more information about laws, about resources available, about who can they reach out to, and then they can then take a step forward with a bit more confidence to help the individual. So broadly, like I've shared with you about the program, so this is a little bit more detail, but it's really bridging the gap between the citizens and the police, where this has come about. And we have seen quite a lot of success. There are multiple cases that I have come across. There are people who have reached out to me. There are people who have reached out to the others who are there on the field. And there have been many situations where we have been able to bring it to a logical conclusion. Again, when I'm talking about resources, the police department itself has resources from shelter homes, to counseling centers, to lawyers who can help individuals who are equipped in dealing with situations like these. The police department has she teams, which are meant for dealing with the women in distress, and that typically they're people who roam around without uniforms. So you won't become a spectacle. People are very scared of people in uniform coming into their homes, and these she teams is a concept that Telangana state started, and where these individuals roam around in non-uniform, so civil or plain clothes, so they don't create a spectacle out of when they go and deal with the situation. So these are some of the sensitivities that we brought in, and more the police department than us who brought this in. And when we tell these individuals that, no, don't worry, there won't be a spectacle in your house. We'll have people coming in plain clothes, and they can be your friend and coming into your house and helping you. It gave them a lot of comfort and confidence, and they could step beyond the inhibition that they had. So
thank you, Vishnu Priya. Thank you. It's beautiful to see how the an issue has been identified, and how there's been that fear or reluctance from community members to go to the police, to police officers, and how you along with your group of people have looked around ways to tackle that issue, where it's creating that bridge between the police officers and individuals, and then also creating that space, or that one friend that victims can talk to. And it's also nice to see that there's men are getting involved as well. As we were talking before, it is also an issue that affects men. And so thank you. So yes, just a reminder, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat section, and then we'll have a discussion, a Q&A at the end. So we'll introduce our next speaker. Dr. Linda Parker. Dr. Parker has more than 16 years of professional experience, both in human service and domestic violence services, and as an educator and an administrator at the university level. Since 2020, she has been the president and CEO of Women in Distress. And prior to that, she was the executive director of victim services at the Peace River Center in Polk County. Prior to relocating to Florida from Iowa in 2016, Dr. Parker held director and vice president positions at William Penn University in West Des Moines, Iowa, where she led efforts to expand online learning. She also continues as an adjunct professor at William Penn and at the Southern New Hampshire University in Manchester, New Hampshire. Earlier in her career, she was a domestic violence advocate at Children and Families of Iowa and worked as counselor for women transitioning from prison. Dr. Parker earned her BA from Grandview University in Des Moines, Iowa, and has a master's and doctorate degrees in psychology from Walden University at Minneapolis. Dr. Parker, thank you for being here and talking to us about your work. Can you please tell us more about Women in Distress of Broward County and the services available to victims of domestic violence?
So thank you so much for having me today. So Women in Distress is located in Broward County. In the state of Florida, each county has a designated domestic violence center. And for Broward County, Women in Distress is a certified center. Each different center offers different programs depending on how they're structured, but basic programming is covered by the state. What Women in Distress has for programming is pretty large. We're the largest domestic violence shelter in the state of Florida other than Miami-Dade, and Miami-Dade is partially overseen by the county, so it's a little different than some of the other centers. But what we offer is we try to offer hope. So one of the things that we know that domestic violence survivors go through is that often each domestic violence, and I say this for everyone, if you've met one domestic abuse survivor, you've met one domestic abuse survivor. All of us have a very different view of how we've seen our lives through domestic abuse and how domestic abuse impacts each person. So what we try to do is clear the path for the person to get back successfully into a life where there's no violence. We do that in a myriad of ways. We have a full-time counseling service free for families and for adults that is open every day, Monday through Saturday. We have a domestic violence shelter on campus that houses around 140 beds at any given time. It's a little flexible in different ways depending on how many kiddos we have. The kids tend to outnumber the moms quite a bit, so we generally see about 3/4 kids, 1/4 moms or parents. We do accept all levels at the domestic violence shelter. So to the point about women, we do accept men also. We actually have a special population wing for specific cases, men, cases that are really high lethality. To the point about some of the things we saw over COVID, some of the most frightening things we saw were an increase in high lethality cases. And high lethality, how we code a high lethality case is a case where death is likely going to occur if their intervention is not done. There are specific markers for someone with domestic violence for a high lethality case. For instance, choking is one of the things that we look for in a high lethality case. Marital rape is one of the ones that we see highly in high lethality. Threatening to hurt the family pets or children is another indicator of high lethality. Unfortunately, we have seen an increase in deaths to domestic violence because of COVID. And we're really trying to get a handle on getting to people early and often. So we do have a very large primary prevention system, and that primary prevention system begins working with kids as young as elementary school. We really obviously don't talk to children about domestic violence because that's not appropriate, and we don't want to scare children, but we do want to talk to them about appropriate behaviors, treating people with respect, bullying, what is a healthy relationship. As we get into high school and we talk to kids about relationships, we talk to them about what is a healthy relationship, what is acceptable, and what you should not have to put up with in a relationship. We also have as Manju and I were talking before this, we have a lovely pet shelter. We understand that for survivors, many survivors do not want to leave without their pets. And in many cases, the pets are one of the folks who are something that get injured as a result of the domestic violence. So in 2000, I believe it was around 2015-16, we were able to raise enough money to put together a beautiful pet shelter with a pet park, and that pet shelter is endowed for the entire time that we'll be around. So we're very grateful for that. In addition to all of the therapy, we also provide advocacy and case management services, because we understand that many survivors come to us with zero money. Part of the cycle of domestic violence is financial coercive control. So often survivors come in without having any background in how much money they have. Some of them have not been allowed to work for many years, or if they were working, their money was taken. So we have to start back from the beginning and trying to assist with getting back control, right? We work off an empowerment-based model, which means that we walk together with the survivor. We don't force anything upon the survivor that they do not want. We don't have expectations for them. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 weeks for the survivor to come into shelter and even just decompress enough to really realize what they've been dealing with. And so we try to give them the space to do that. But to the point that Vishnupriya was making, we often see some of the same issues. Folks are afraid of the police. More than that, they're afraid of child welfare coming in and punishing them as a result of being in a domestic violence situation by taking their children. They're afraid of the system and the process. I think for a lot of folks, there's this idea that if you're in a domestic violence relationship, the best thing that you can do is get a restraining order and flee. We don't always see that as the best course of action. Sometimes that can inflame the issue with a domestic abuser and can actually put the victim in a worse situation and cause them to actually erupt and do something drastic. So we weigh every situation to see what the best course of action. We do have a law firm that we have as part of Women in Distress. That law firm does only injunctions for protection, and we do around 15 to 3,000 injunctions a year, 1,500 to 3,000 a year with just different survivors, because that can sometimes help, but as stated, it just depends on the survivor's needs. We also have a connection to the Office of Attorney General, and folks can apply for what's called relocation funds. So they can apply to relocate either outside of the state or inside the state. And those monies go to try to find a safe place for them to be. So there's a lot of resources that are available for survivors. I think part of what we don't always do well is getting out the information that we're here. The movement of domestic violence was really started on a movement of women helping women, and an underground movement of moving women from house to house, because at that time there was no laws or rules protecting women from abusers, from husbands, from boyfriends, from anyone. So it became a secret network. That secrecy has kind of continued today. Some of that is positive because the secrecy of the confidentiality of the shelter is important. But some of that precludes people from being able to find us when they need us. During COVID, we took a huge drop initially in calls, and then it just shot through the roof. And I think that had a lot to do with people initially panicked and didn't know that we were available or that we were still operating. Then when they realized that we were still operating, they panicked because they couldn't leave their home. The excuses that we traditionally give folks for leaving the house were not available. Right? So you couldn't go to the doctor and make an excuse that you needed to go to the doctor and pass the doctor a note. You couldn't go to your mom's because COVID, everyone was saying stay in your home. So one of the things we had to shift to as a staff and as a hotline was safety planning to keep people in the home. And that's really the first time we've done it on this level. And it was extremely tough for our staff to switch to that direction because we want people to get out, right? But in that instance, it was almost more safe to stay with the abuser than try to get out of the house because they had nowhere to go. They could come to us, but getting to us was an issue sometimes. And calling the police is not always an option. For a lot of the cultural folks that we work with, the different cultures, police are not always viewed as a helpful endeavor. And for some folks, we heard, I'm afraid if I call the police, they're going to shoot the batter, and I don't hate him. I just don't want to be with him anymore. And so that's a dichotomy for our survivors that is real. And that is something that we really have to work through as a community to figure out how to build that trust up, and how can the police department work successfully with the survivors to build that trust. And, Broward County has great police, and we generally have great relationships with them, but that doesn't always transcend to certain groups. So that's something that we're working on. Some of the things that the state of Florida does really well with domestic violence, and some things, like I said, we need to improve upon, like our primary prevention or our prevention activities. One of the things we know breaks the cycle of domestic violence is early intervention, right? So when do we intervene? And whose job is that to intervene? And how do we get the message out to folks that these behaviors are not acceptable, right? Families that grew up with a lot of domestic violence tend to create long-term generational domestic violence, and we've got to break that cycle.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Yeah, Women in Distress offers a holistic approach. From you're not just tackling like the symptom, but you are going to the root cause of everything, and from everything, whether it be focusing on prevention. You mentioned that many times it's not just at the time of, but how can you prevent this from happening, whether it be by talking to young children on how to how to treat others, how to socialize, advocacy. You have a pet shelter, so lots of things going on. So wonderful things. Yeah. Thank you. And also the way you've navigated the issues that were presented during COVID-19. I mean, it's true. I never really think about it, of how you're just stuck at home. You can't go anywhere. And what do you do when you're in an abusive relationship? So also being able to navigate that and offer other resources to victims. Thank you. I'll introduce now our third and final, but not final panelist, Virginie Paul. Virginie Paul was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. She is a single mother and was raised by her grandmother. At age 14, she migrated to South Florida and finished her high school education. In 2008, Virginie got married to a narcissistic man and was frequently abused by her then husband. She gave birth to her daughter and became a mother, and where it gave her a sense of purpose and empowerment. Virginie knew that she would always be her child's advocate and would protect her from all harm, including any abuse from her husband. After years of going through a domestic abuse, she officially divorced in 2014, while she had supported herself and taking and afterwards she had to support herself, and she took a range of jobs, including braiding hair to babysitting to receiving her temporary protected status that allowed her to broaden her own horizons. She started working as a home health aide, a role that assisted her in broaden her horizons. In March of 2017, Virginie opened her own home health care agency. However, unexpected trouble left her without a roof over her head. Instead, she had to move into a hotel for a year, where she worked multiple jobs, including becoming an Uber driver, taking on babysitting jobs, and doing contractual work, while continuing to grow her own agency. Being the strong-spirited woman that she is, she did not let that stop, and she has continued with her agency and growing it. Virginie, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. And can you please share with us more about your story? Sorry, we can't hear you.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Virginie. Thank you, Manju, for having me on the platform. And I'm very grateful to be here. And as everyone, my story is I'm from Haiti. I came here at a very young age. And fortunately, life had some things in place for me. But as I grow up in life and each day goes by, I had to realize and eventually had a conversation with myself to a point where I become married to a man that was having his own personal issues that I had to become to realize, because in my situation where I was married to a man that had his own personal problem. And with me, I was caught up in that personal problem, and it was tough. But as I go, I talk to myself. The only thing I never lost in the process is myself. Because if I had lost myself in the process, probably I wouldn't be here talking about this situation. I would have been in the past. But I become realize this is a man that's broken. And this is the measure I had to take. And when I was young, I didn't have a father figure in my life. And my mom was always sick. My mom been sick since she was 7. She suffered from epileptic. And I never forgot, my father was never really a father to me, but he was always under shadow. He's always take care of me, in a sense, but the bond of father and daughter we never have. But I learned a lot from him. But there's one thing he did tell me, and I watch him all the time. He's a very successful man, and he's a hard worker. And he did tell me one day, if you focus in your school, you do what you need to do, you will not have to live the life that you grew up from. And I took that in life. And when I got married, I went through the violence. I went through it. Mine wasn't to the level where I was in a situation well, not to go into detail, but I was on a level where I could talk to myself and I knew what I wanted it. And later on, my daughter came in, and the last incident that happened, my daughter witnessed an incident in front of her. And I never forgot that. And she told her dad, don't ever touch my mom again. And this is when I realized you need to walk away, because in domestic violence relationship, you could go around asking for help, but if you're not willing to receive that help, you're wasting people's time and wasting your time and putting your life or other people's life at risk. And when that time happened with my daughter, this is the time I knew I had to walk away. And within the process, and I gladly went to legal aid. I had to report, because when I felt like I was between life and death, I had to report. And when I did, and I gratefully was routed to Menju from legal aid. And once I reached Menju, Menju was able to help me to get my green card. And later on, and I started working as an HHA, doing multiple jobs. I used to travel about four or 5 times a month for babysitting, and which was taking a lot of time away from me and my daughter. And I told myself, you know what, once I have my green card, I'm not gonna be clocking in for anybody anymore. I wanna work for myself, because I never had time for my child. So what I did is I work as an HHA, and then one day I visited a lady's business and I told her, are you a nurse? She's like, no. And she gave me advice. And when she gave me advice, I took it and I slowly started working, and I opened the agency. I lost my home, and once I lost my home, I lived in a hotel while I was doing Uber. I was doing different jobs, and then in the meantime, I had the business going, so I had to pay bill for the business and everything. So once I had all that going on, eventually, I think it took me about 2 years or so, then I started working for myself. I didn't have to do multiple jobs, where I become to a time, I had time for my daughter. I was able to purchase a house. I was able to give her the time that she never really had the time to get from me, because I was too busy catching on in life. But out of all the situation, what I learned, and my advice I could give is, whenever you go into this type of trouble, you can't dismiss yourself. You have to somehow communicate with yourself, find that peace somehow. I don't care if it's 1 minute, 2 minutes, find that peace to talk to yourself, because everyone else could be willing to help you. But at the end of the day, what is it that you want? Because me, there was a time that I was going back and forth to him, and he had to come up to a point where I had to put a stop to it. But I am, what can I say? I am not exactly where I want to be, but I am blessed where I am, and I will not stop. And like I mentioned to Menju before, once I get to the point with my business and everything, this is something I would be doing and talking out there, helping throughout the community however I can, and within my business however I can, with women that are struggling, that are working. I give them advice, I help however I can. But at the moment, this is where I am with my business, and I am in the process of opening a second location. And I'm very content. I'm very content. The only thing I am happy for is I never forgot myself. I never forgot to have a conversation with myself, because at the end of the day, it's all about you. What is it that you want? And it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot. And so far, this is all I have to say. And thank you, everyone. I am back to you.
Thank you, Virginie. It's definitely a powerful story.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we need to have more stories like this, because we do tend to think that domestic violence is a private matter, something that it's perhaps only me that's going through it, or maybe it's my fault, or who's going to listen to me, but that's not the case. It is.
Right.
If I can interrupt one thing, I've known Virginie for about 7 years now. From the time she came into my office, scared, without papers, somewhat homeless. It's amazing what she has done with the time in the last 6 to 7 years, raising a child, building a business, and now opening a second location. Very gratifying to see somebody that I've, to pull herself up. Very
yes, I couldn't do it without you too. I could not do it without you, and I always tell you that.
You do, but you know what? You did it yourself. The hard work.
Yes.
So congratulations.
Yes. You can do it yourself. I had to work with you to do it. It's always about teamwork. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have a series of questions for our panelists. And once again, just as a reminder, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, put them in the chat section, and we'll read them out and have them answered. So, get your questions in. We do have some questions. We also have my colleague, Mona, who will be assisting as well with the questioning. But I can go ahead and I can start with a few questions. Can you just give me a second?
Liz, did you want me to start?
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Liz. That was for facilitating that conversation. What a treasure trove of information across 2 countries. We're hearing of patterns. We're hearing of support systems being set up, which are incredible, not just in times of so-called normalcy, not pre-pandemic times, but also what is happening now with COVID and every other impact that it's having. So I am Mona Lisa Gangopadhyay. I am on the board of this daughter. And for the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be conducting the question answer session with Liz. We have a set of questions that we have come up with, but like Liz said, please feel free to pop some of your questions in the chat. We will pick them up. The questions that we will ask largely are going to be addressed to the entire panel, and you can respond in alphabetic order. So the way I looked at it would be Dr. Parker, Ms. Paul, and Ms. Saxena. You all touched on how each of your organizations, or Virginia, with you, your life has been impacted by the pandemic. Is there any pattern or any trend that has caught you by surprise at your individual level as well as within your organization? And if those trends have then highlighted the gaps which are in the existing structural system, in the existing structural support that you have in place? Dr. Parker, we'll start with you.
So, I think for us, the surprise was initially the drop in calls. I think that surprised us because we expected to receive like this huge increase in calls and it didn't happen right away. So we kind of were a little confused and frightened. And I think when the calls spiked back up, we realized that there had been a lag because they thought we weren't available, right? Because everything was closing down. So that was a surprise. I think the sheer volume of deaths and the increasing deaths as a relation was a shocking revelation. I think that we all knew that there was going to be an increase on some level because you can't keep people contained in a small area with no resources, being in their home without some impact. But I have to say, it's pretty frightening, the number of deaths that have happened as a result of the pandemic. The way we're adjusting is we have a number of committees that are working on the problem. We've also worked directly with the police department, and we also have a DD task force in each county that looks at these numbers and tries to figure out how we can prevent and or help the criminal justice system catch things before they get out of hand. Some of these issues that we saw could have been addressed at the legal level. So for instance, we had a case where there was a young boy that was shot by his father. The mom knew that there was a problem. Like, she raised the red flag and she did everything she could she did what we tell people to do. The system failed her, right? So we have to realize that the system is broken and start to really address those broken issues, or more people are going to die as a result.
It is frightening to think of the layering here of the hurdles for women, men, children, pets to get to the help that they need beyond the normalized framework of fear that domestic violence spurns. So thank you for that. Ms. Paul, Virginie, if you can speak a little bit about your work and how the agency is being put in place during this time of COVID, how you handled the impact of COVID?
Well, at the beginning, it was a little shock to everyone because this is a new way of working that we wasn't used to. And when we first started, the business kind of declined because a lot of families were pulling out service because they were afraid of having caregivers and at their home. And after 2-3 months, things started going up again because, I'm in the medical field, and the base of my business is I started working with kids with disability. And till this day, my major part where I major in is kids with disability, not only kids, but any age of person with disability, and Medicaid provide the funds for that. And as we speak right now, to be honest, I'm very busy every day. You're getting cases every day, and they are from different aspects. There are some cases where we have violence going on where I have to deal with this year. Throughout the pandemic, the violence and the suicide have gone up very high because families are losing their kids, they're losing their mates, and it's been up and down. But the cases that are coming in, I've spoken to my manager not too long ago, those are very tragic cases. They have to do with violence. They have to do with mom having, mom losing their mind in a way. You can't blame it. But the pandemic definitely hurt us in many different ways. And from my end, I always go in. Even if I'm not at the office, I always go in and meet with clients to see their environment, to see how I can help. And in my business, there's certain things that I don't do, but I put myself and I affiliate myself with different company. If you are dealing with this is where you need to go. I wow them where I cannot aid. If it has to do with DCF, if it has to do with violence, I wow them where they need to go. But definitely COVID have a huge impact, and it's scary in a way. But eventually something has to come up because like Women in Distress is doing a lot in the community, and there is other company helping also to help people overcome, and especially nowadays with social media, you seeing all sorts of advertisement and everything. So with social media also, everything is going virtual. At the same time, I'm hoping everybody have access to the internet and everything because there is help out there. Because right now, everybody's in a stage of mind. If you don't hold yourself together, you will lose it. Because being home and not working, and even if you're working at home, before we would work and we go out, and even if we have problem with each other, by the time we reach home, we shower, we eat, we go to bed, but now we all sharing that same space together. And in my business line of business, I've been seeing those cases. I have been seeing those cases from my hand. However I can, I help, but once it's out of my reach, I have to route it somewhere else where they could get the help that they need.
Thank you, Virginie, for sharing that. And thank you for doing what you can, not just in terms of helping when there's domestic violence or any form of other antagonism in those spaces, but also the work that you're doing with your patients. It's rough work. I work in care, and so I know the work that you do. So thank you for that.
Yes, and one thing I wanted, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish up.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention, and with my service, when I come across a family that's going through abuse, and they have, especially when you have kids with special needs, that create issues in the relationship, in the marriage too. And a lot of parents does not know that there is service out there that could help them with their child. Because once you have somebody in the home helping you, building your relationship too, so we don't have those adversities going on. So I advertise a lot on that side for parents that are going through this type of differency, because it's a matter that's not spoken about. Sometimes you hear violence, but once you have kids with special needs, some parent accept it, some doesn't, and they clash. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Ms. Saxena, you spoke about Sangamitra, and that was an outshoot for the COVID times. Would you want to talk a little bit more about any specific patterns that you're seeing that perhaps could be India specific, if there is such a term, just culturally more ingrained from there, and any gaps that Sangamitra was able to fill out in a satisfactory way?
So, yep. And, one of the things you talked about was the surprise. So during the COVID time, domestic violence we know is prevalent, but one of the things that came up during this time, again, especially during the lockdown period. So like I was saying, all the action was at home. So there was no respite that individuals had. And we saw a lot of people believe that if women are financially independent, they will not take abuse as much because they're not dependent on anyone. And that was one of the surprises that we came across, that more women came forward to talk about abuse that they had been going through over the years. There's a friend I had, a person fairly senior in a big company, so did not need a husband to look after herself and the material needs that one would have. And after having endured 20 plus years, she decided to come out because this period did not give individuals respite. You were holed up in the same room. You were in front of each other. There was conflict everywhere. And you realize that some of these individuals who we believe are better sorted and they're educated and that they have they're financially independent and there are no financial pressures, that they are probably better off or better equipped to deal with their issues. Those kind of cases came up to us much more because the tolerance levels, there was no respite and they could not tolerate the abuse anymore. So otherwise you would go to work, you would do something else, at least those 8-10 hours you're out of the house. Your husband would travel. So, there were those spaces. So, sorry, abuse was always there. But their tolerance level was there because it was probably in smaller amounts. Now that increased and people were now willing to come out in the open and solve it. And we saw more situations, more cases, more scenarios of people from, so to say, better off in terms of their socioeconomic statuses coming up. So that's been quite a revelation for us.
Not a good revelation, right? But at least they are stepping out and they're asking for the help that they need. I think more out of just complete lack of having any space to deal with it when you're cooped up in a house, no matter how big that house is. That tension, month after month, going into a couple of years now, that can take its toll. Which sort of diverts me to the next question I have. We are speaking largely about a framework of people who are normalized as being mainstream. People who have jobs, people who have who have homes, or at least some measure of family. How are you as organizations and individuals reaching out to people who are not in that framework? Especially nowadays, we have so much of refugees moving into, across borders. We have what we would call, what are deemed undocumented immigrants who are coming into our countries. How do you reach out to those communities? How do you let them know that if there is abuse, there is help without repercussions on their immigration status, or in terms of their place in society, which is unstable at best? Dr. Parker?
This is a tough one. One of the things that we talk about is we end up seeing a number of folks that have no resources, no family, no support system. A lot of the times, by the time they get to us, the family is frustrated because they've chosen not to leave. And that's how the family sometimes sees it, is that we want to support you, but it's been so long and you consistently go back to this person. I mean, we know it takes about 7 to 9 times for someone to formally, like, finally decide that they can leave. And that's due to a myriad of issues. But a lot of times friends and family will get frustrated during that process. And as it relates to immigration, you know, one of the things we have to do is connect up with immigration folks as soon as someone hits our shelter, or as soon as someone identifies that they don't have documents. For us, that makes no never mind to services, because I truly just want you to be safe. So we're going to get you to a place where you're going to get what you need. And a lot of times we can help by applying for V visas or U visas. There's some wiggle room that we can do. So it's up to us as providers to find those resources for the client so that we can clear that path for them and also create safety, because safety isn't just about leaving the abuser. Safety is, once I leave, what happens then, right? And I'll stay because if I leave, this is the connection to my citizenship, right? If I stay here, then I can be a citizen. If I leave, who knows what will happen? So what we tell survivors is, we will figure it out. We will find an attorney. We will pour our resources into whatever we have to do. They can stay in the shelter while we adjudicate the issues, or we find them a safe place to go that's not going to be an issue for them being there, and that they can stay and work it out. And I think that reassurance is something that gets us, that helps people come to the shelter and helps us help them. But you have to get it out in the community, and they have to know. And that's, I think, the most difficult part of the situation, is assuring them of the safety, because you have to trust us in a way that you don't know us, right? So you have to build trust with those clients and let them know, we are here and this is not a punishment. You did nothing wrong. And we're going to make sure you get to stay and be safe where you're at, and raise your family where you want to.
Do you have any specific programs that does outreach into these communities?
We do have an outreach. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I just want to know how do they find out that you know, women in distress is there, and that there is no barrier based on your immigration status?
So we do have a number of clients from a variety of different cultures, and we often try to match up an advocate with the culture that they're familiar with, right? Because as a white female, it's not appropriate. I mean, it could be, but I don't know enough about all of the nuances that go into every single group. And it's important that I can find someone that is connected to that group and can go into those communities and say, look, and speak the language, right? And say, look, these folks are really, they're going to help you, but we have to be open enough and aware enough to know that that is what we need. And we do that. And we are very, very cognizant at Women in Distress of the different groups, because we're in South Florida. So we try to hire advocates with those specific backgrounds so that they can help with all levels of assistance.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. It's such a huge gap there, and it's fabulous work that you're doing. So thank you for that. Virginia, Ms. Paul, you know, you are out in the field. You're literally talking and working with people and giving them care at their most vulnerable when they're sick. Do you have dealings with people who are deemed undocumented or could be refugees awaiting permanent status? And because there is a sense of empathy, given that you have gone through something, you know, the similar path. Would you like to speak to that a little bit? Ms. Paul?
I had to unmute myself, sorry. Yes, I wanted to refer back to what Ms. Linda was saying. And one thing that gave me confidence when I met with Menjo is my problem is I keep going back and forth to my ex, because I didn't have green card. I'm illegal in this country. I don't have mom and dad. I don't have sisters and brothers. It's me, myself, and I. So at a sense, I had to take this abuse. Why? Because it's lack of knowledge. So once I met with Menjo said, Virginie, you don't have to go through this. He doesn't want to give you the green card. That's fine. You have a child with him. We will apply to VAWA for you. You will have what you need. At that moment, when Manju said that to me, that bring me so much peace. I realized, okay, I don't have to take this, but I have to find safety way to get out the situation safe. And I was able to, because once you have a lack of knowledge, and that's what I meant referring back to technology. And I hope, well, in this day and age, where some husband, they will make sure you don't have a phone, you don't have internet for their own insecurity issues. But the one that do have, it's best that when we have certain service that it is out there on the social media that they could refer to, because once you don't know those help is out there, you are going to deal with this, because what you suffered with back home and the life that you have back home, you don't want to go through it. So once Manju mentioned that to me, I was able to find, yes, I had find, then I started sleeping with families over friends and everything till I find my way out, but I just never forgot myself. But in my field of work, I have not met a family that has immigration issue. And if they did, so once I come in sometime, they know you work with the government and everything, they're afraid. If I sense a problem, and I always communicate with my aide, I don't want to know what's going on at the client's house. Just make sure that the service that's being rendered, the client is safe within that environment. And once I feel the client is not safe within the environment, sometimes I myself have to let the aide pull out where someone else has to come in, which is me that goes in because I want to know what's going on. And once that's out of my reach, I have to let it go further, because I can't provide service to a child that's in a home that's not safe. And if mom and dad are not doing anything about it, and it's not my department to step in, someone else has to step in, which is the CF. And if a client approached me regarding things like that, I would refer them to women in distress. But have I come through a parent going through immigration issue? No. Have I come through violence? Yes. Yes.
Well, they couldn't ask for a better advocate than you, so I'm glad you were there. Thank you for that.
I try my best. I try my best.
You can't ask for more than that, and I'm sure your best is very, very good. So thank you. Now shifting to Miss Saxena, Vishnupriya, India is it's this gamut of variations, right? Culturally, linguistically, so on and so forth. But we're also seeing a burgeoning issue with refugees, whether it's the Rohingyas or people from Bangladesh or Nepal, or even within states, moving from state to state. Is there anything that your organization is doing, that you are doing, that or you have plans for, to reach out to people who don't fall within the what I would term a privileged socioeconomic class, who don't speak English, for instance, or are not educated, don't have taxed jobs, and so on? So if you could shed a little light on that, that'd be great.
Sure. So, as such, is there a specific initiative to reach out to folks who are not as organized, they are corporate or a residential community? So it's very hard to reach out, right? Because it's not an organized set. It's very, very hard to reach out. Yet the folks who volunteer with us or who are going through these programs with us, we do tell them that your sphere of influence is not only the company that you work in, or only the community that you live in, but also the paraphernalia or the tertiary folks who are around it. So starting from, say, house helps to drivers and people who you come in contact with who may be from another socioeconomic class, community, etc. So in that senses, the help, we are being able to reach help to them. For sure. And there are multiple cases that I can share with you where we've been able to help someone out. I also feel that that usually now, specifically on refugees or specifically on migrants, that there are paper issues, etc. I have not come across anything in direct experience so far, but people from a different socioeconomic class, absolutely, and the people we've been able to help. I also feel that they are more forthcoming when they're in trouble than people of socioeconomic classes which are a little better off, so to say. So there's lesser of that social stigma, and there's lesser of that perception and image management. So they are more forthcoming than folks otherwise.
Having issues with fat fingering my mute button. But yes, spot on. It always comes down to that, right? It comes down to desperation versus level of desperation versus image, especially coming from India. I understand that perhaps a little better. But thank you for, and I'm glad that, you know, the just by osmosis, just by being in the presence of privileged communities, you're able to spread the support that is needed to be able to pull people who otherwise may not be able to leave a violent situation. You're able to pull them out and help them with whatever resources they need. So thank you for that.
I just add that from as a structured program perspective, we've started to work on something where we're able to reach out to like rural areas, semi-urban kind of spaces also, with the kind of work that we are doing. So there are plans, but not yet started.
Plans are better than nothing, right? That's how you build. That's how buildings are built. So fantastic. Congratulations on that. We have a few minutes left. I don't see any questions from the audience. Liz, is there anything specific you wanted to ask?
Yes, I do have a question for Dr. Parker. So Dr. Parker, domestic violence doesn't happen only between older, long-term committed couples, but it also happens between teens who are dating. And we also in recent years, there has been more news about well, women, specifically women getting abused in colleges. Can you talk a little bit more about domestic like experiences between like dating violence, and how does it look, and what resources are available to teens experiencing such violence?
So, you know, I talked a little bit about our primary prevention and how we really focus on getting to youth early, and that's because we actually see some of the signs in domestic abuse early and in high school, junior high, high school. If you think about where we were at maybe with puberty maybe 20 years ago, right? And there's a number of factors that people speculate about why we hit puberty much earlier as a society. But if you think about where hormonally folks are at in junior high and high school now, it's sped up quite a bit. And so that leads to a number of factors where the hormones and the emotions don't match the maturity of the person, right? So you've got that going on, plus you've got the social aspect of a number of things going on, the stress level. Social media has a huge impact. Think about all of the instant gratification things that you see on social media and how social media plays out in relationships, the bullying behaviors that we see in social media, the high expectations for young ladies to look a certain way on social media, how we really want our women to, we really highlight women of a certain like type, right? So all of those things, and we want, same thing for boys, right? So they see pictures of men with like these washboard abs and, you know, these alpha males that are really strong. And that's just not realistic to real life. Like none of us look like a model, or some people do, but for the majority of us, we're just average folks, right? So all of those factors play into what is kind of a thing for kids. What we see when it revolves around domestic abuse relationships with teens, we see a lot of the same factors we see with adults. So it generally starts off as a cycle where, and except young girls and young boys will think that these behaviors mean something different. So one of the things I heard a lot when I used to advise a group of college students, they had an advisory group that worked in domestic violence. And I would always say to them, you know, things that you guys might think are cute are really not good behaviors for a relationship. Things like having to track all of where you're at with your friends, right? So, oh, it's so cute. My boyfriend, he always wants to know where I'm at and what I'm doing. That's not really cute. And that evolves into other behaviors, right? Alienating you from your friends and family is a big one for teens. I don't like the fact that you're friends with this boy and so you can't be friends with him anymore. And the girlfriend is more afraid of losing the boyfriend than others. Financial, right? So the boy may not have a job and the girl's parents are like, we really expect you to work as a teenager. So we're going to take but you're going to pay for everything. And you love me, right? So you should buy me this Xbox. You should buy me these gifts. So that's how it starts with young kids. It starts off as a cutesy, like, oh, they want to wrap me in so much love. And for us as providers or for DV advocates, we're like, whoa, like these are not okay signs to be having for children. And, we also talk to them about how they are spoken to and how they speak to others. A lot of the aggression and things that we see with kids is rudeness, name calling. It's not acceptable ever for your partner to call you names, even in anger, right? Those of us that have healthy relationships, our partner would never call us a nasty name because that's not how we argue. That's not appropriate. So disagreements, teaching kids that appropriate disagreements are okay. It's okay to have a differing opinion as someone else. It's not okay to take that to an extreme where words hurt you or the choices hurt you. If the things that person is doing hurts you in some way, that's not okay. And if they don't acknowledge the hurt and they continue to do it, it's really not okay. And if it escalates, it's time to leave, right? So those are some of the things we see with teenagers. I think also we have to be a little bit careful when we have kids go off to college. I raised 3 daughters and a son, and I had different conversations with my daughters about their protection at college than I had with my son. And I remember being very young and saying to myself, like, I'm going to raise my kids, their genders are going to be equal, and it's not really feasible because the things that because I'm an equality person, right? So I'm like, everything should be equal, but that's not really feasible. And the scary thing for women is that we are always under scrutiny by someone, right? So whether in college, women often get followed by boys, you go to parties, there's alcohol involved. How do you protect yourself? And it's not that we're blaming you if something happens, right? Because that's something they're like, well, why did women have to do all of this? We have to do this because there are people around us that force us into this space to do these things. It's not because we want to guard our drinks or carry them around everywhere we go because we're afraid of setting them down to get roofied. It's not that we want to not give our friends the autonomy. I told my daughters, you never leave a friend at a party. You never let her go with a boy she doesn't know. You don't, there are a lot of things that we do with young women, and those are some of the tools that we tell young women when they go out. Just be mindful that generally you can get into situations that you have no control over, that you're just trying to be kind, and kindness is great, but it also can be something that we really need to be mindful of with our daughters. So those are some of the things we talk to them about.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Yeah, it's what you said, and going back to your presentation, it does start at an early age, just educating, and as well, like especially educating young women that certain attitudes are not okay, and they don't have to stand for, whether it be as a young person dating or even as an older individual dating. That's something that you're breaking the cycle. We are out of time, unfortunately. Thank you for
Liz,
the wonderful discussion. Want to have something? Yes.
Liz, just one. this is a little tidbit, which I want to end this conversation about the whole digital social media self-image. There's actually a term now, it's called Zoom surgery. So we have boys and girls going in and asking specifically for certain features to be fixed so that they would look good on their Zoom calls. Girls, boys, men, and women. So here we are with another new word, new trend from COVID times, I suppose. So on that note, I will hand it back to Liz.
And I'll hand it to Manju if you have any closing remarks. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dr. Parker, Ms. Sanfiska, Vanishra, and Virginie. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you, Liz and Mona, for doing a wonderful job moderating. And thank you so much to the speakers, Linda, Virginie, and Vishnupriya. You brought a wealth of information, and all three of you are from such different cultures, but what stands out is domestic violence, cuts across barriers. It doesn't matter what your race is, religion, socioeconomic status, domestic violence happens in every background. And as Linda alluded, domestic violence is not just physical, but it's also financial, emotional, sexual abuse. Most of us tend to think of physical abuse as, okay, let's see where you were hit. Because in some of the cases I've done, thankfully, some of these victims went to the police, so we do have photographs of physical abuse. But what happens when you have financial abuse and emotional abuse? You can't document it. Those cases are a little harder to prove. Thank you again so much. Thisdaughter.com, as Liz said, is a platform for women of all ages and of all cultures. Hopefully we can learn from each other and build each other up from our experiences. And our next event hopefully will be in January. We're talking about that. I think that'll be undertaken by Mona Lisa. Thank you again for giving us your time on a Saturday morning and a Saturday evening for those of you joining us from India. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.